I pretended to be poor while she humiliated me. Then she met me as the chairman of the biggest corporation in the city. Before we dive deeper, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. We will be excited to have you join our growing family of enthusiasts who enjoy the wonderful stories told on this channel. My name is Daniel Carter. And before you judge what I'm about to tell you, understand this. I did not grow up craving revenge. I grew up learning restraint. For most of my life, I learned that the loudest people in the room are rarely the most powerful. They talk to be noticed. They boast to feel secure. They interrupt because silence terrifies them. Real power doesn't do any of that. Real power watches. It listens. And most importantly, it waits. That lesson was not taught to me in a classroom or a boardroom. It was taught to me in a quiet hospital room by a man whose voice was already fading. My father. I still remember the steady beeping of machines that sounded far too calm for what they were measuring. He looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, but his eyes, those were unchanged, sharp, observant, patient. He held my hand and said something that didn't make sense to me at the time. He said, "Daniel, never rush to show people who you are. Let them tell you who they are first." I nodded, not fully understanding. I would later realize that those words were not advice. They were a warning. Years later, I would use these lessons in something far more revealing. A relationship with a woman who believed she was better than me. Her name was Clara Williams. And for a long time, Clara thought I was nothing. Not just poor, insignificant. She thought my life was small. My ambitions were limited. My presence was optional. She spoke to me the way people speak to things they don't fear losing. Casually, carelessly, cruelly. And I let her. Not because I couldn't stop her, but because I wanted to see how far she would go when she believed there were no consequences. You see, people reveal their true nature not when they're angry, but when they feel superior. When they believe you need them more than they need you, when they think you're replaceable. That's when the mask slips. And Clara's mask didn't just slip. It shattered. When I first met her, she didn't see a man. She saw a measurement. What I wore. What I drove. Where I could afford to go. She evaluated me in seconds and filed me into a category she thought was permanent. Below her. She didn't know my name before she knew my limits. She didn't ask my story before she judged my value. And once she decided I was beneath her, she felt entitled to treat me that way. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that my silence wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Because while Clara was busy measuring my worth by what I showed, I was taking note of what she revealed. Every joke, every sigh, every dismissive glance, every humiliation she thought was harmless. I remembered all of it. And one day she would too. This is not a story about money. It's a story about respect. It's about what happens when someone mistakes humility for weakness. When they confuse silence for surrender. When they believe power must always announce itself. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody is paying attention to. And sometimes, the man you humiliate for being broke is the same man who will later decide your future. Without raising his voice, without explaining himself, without ever needing your apology. And by the time you realize who he really is, it's already too late. Clara Williams didn't notice me at first. That detail matters. We were in the same space, attending the same professional networking event, standing under the same dim lights and polite conversations. But she didn't see me. Not really. Her eyes skimmed past me the way people skim past background noise. She noticed the suits first, the watches, the confident laughter of men who spoke as if the room belonged to them. I was wearing a plain jacket, clean but unremarkable, no logo, no shine, the kind of outfit that doesn't demand attention. And that was exactly why I wore it. When our paths finally crossed, it wasn't because she sought me out. It was because the man she wanted to speak to had already turned away. I was convenient, available. She smiled politely and asked what I did. I answered honestly, but incompletely. I work with businesses, I said. She waited for more. When I didn't add titles or numbers, her smile adjusted. Not disappeared, just recalibrated, as if she had just learned how seriously to take me. That was the moment Clara decided who I was. And once she decided, she never thought she'd need to reconsider. I asked Clara out a few days later. Her response came quickly, too quickly. Sure, she said, where were you thinking? I suggested a small cafe near my place. Quiet, comfortable, the kind of place where conversations lasted longer than impressions. There was a pause. Then she laughed, softly, politely. Oh, that place, she said. I've heard of it. She hadn't. But maybe something a little more elevated, she added. I don't really do those spots anymore. Those spots? The way she said it made the cafe sound like a phase she had outgrown. I suggested another place, still modest, still honest. She checked her phone and said she'd get back to me. She didn't. Over the next few weeks, I asked again. And again. Each time the same pattern repeated. She liked the idea of being wanted, but not by someone she believed was beneath her standards. One time, she said she loved the idea of dinner, but didn't like the neighborhood. Another time, she said she preferred places where the crowd matched her energy. Once, she said something that stayed with me. Daniel, I'm at a stage in my life where environment really matters. What she meant was money, but she didn't want to sound shallow. So she dressed it up as growth. She agreed to a date on a night when work had drained her. She was tired of impressing people who didn't care, tired of chasing validation, tired of being strong. And suddenly, I was useful. We met at a mid-range restaurant she approved of, nothing spectacular, nothing embarrassing. Throughout the night, she talked about herself. Her career path, her ambitions, her frustrations with people who weren't serious enough. She asked what I wanted out of life. When my answer didn't include speed or status, she nodded the way people nod when they stop listening. Still, she stayed. Not because she admired me, but because she believed I would always be there. I brought her flowers the next time we met. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful. She smiled politely, then later, while sitting with her friends, held them up and said, "He brought me these, isn't that sweet?" Her tone turned it into a joke. Her friends smiled. One of them laughed and said, "Oh, at least he's trying." I was sitting right there. They didn't lower their voices. And I realized something important in that moment. They weren't being cruel. They were being comfortable. I started picking Clara up from her office sometimes. I waited outside, always on time, always patient. She hated it. Her coworkers would walk past, glance at me, then look back at her with curiosity. Once someone asked if I was her ride. She laughed and said, "He's with me." Not proudly, not defensively, just dismissively. Another time, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Clara said, "He's still figuring things out." And just like that, my entire existence was summarized. The humiliations didn't start loudly. They evolved. At first, Clara's comments were accidental, at least that's how she framed them. Small jokes, light teasing, the kind of remarks people excuse by saying, that's just her personality. But over time, something shifted. She realized I wouldn't stop her. And once she realized that, humiliation stopped being an accident. It became entertainment. Around her friends, Clara changed completely. Her posture straightened. Her voice grew sharper. She laughed louder. It was as if my presence gave her something to perform against, a contrast that made her feel elevated. One evening we were sitting with her friends at a rooftop lounge. I hadn't chosen the place. She had. I noticed she always did when other people were around. One of her friends glanced at my phone when it lit up on the table and laughed. "That's vintage," she said. Clara didn't defend me. She smiled and added, "Daniel doesn't really care about upgrading things. He's very minimalist." The way she said minimalist made it sound like a flaw. Another time, she looked at my shoes and shook her head jokingly. "You really need to step it up," she said. "People might think I'm paying for everything." Everyone laughed. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not anger, not sadness, but something heavier. A tightness that made my breathing slow and deliberate. I realized then that she wasn't humiliating me because she disliked me. She was humiliating me because it made her feel powerful. And power, once tasted, is addictive. One night, she leaned across the table and said loudly, "I swear if Daniel didn't have me, he'd probably still be lost." That one landed differently. Not because it was cruel, but because it was said so confidently. As if my life before her hadn't existed. As if my value was something she had granted. Her friends nodded, someone joked. "Well, at least he's loyal." Loyal? Not intelligent. Not capable. Not worthy. Just loyal. I smiled politely, even as something inside me hardened. I stopped trying to be understood. I stopped hoping for fairness. And that was when silence stopped being pain and started becoming protection. Clara believed my silence meant submission. She believed my patience meant insecurity. She believed that because I stayed, I must be afraid to leave. She never considered another possibility. That I was observing. You see, silence does something strange to people. It removes resistance. It removes caution. When someone believes you can't hurt them, they stop guarding themselves. They tell you the truth. They show you how they really think. And Clara showed me everything. She showed me how differently she treated people based on what she believed they could offer her. How her tone softened around executives. How her laughter became lighter around men with money. How her respect rose and fell with status. I noticed how she interrupted me, but never interrupted her manager. How she mocked my lack of ambition, but admired the same qualities in powerful men, calling it mystery or confidence. She didn't hate me. She ranked me. And once I realized that, I stopped taking anything personally. I started taking notes. I learned how she justified cruelty by calling it honesty. How she disguised arrogance as standards. How she believed kindness was optional when someone couldn't retaliate. Every insult, every joke, every dismissive glance became data. And the more she humiliated me, the more certain I became that revealing myself early would have been a mistake. Because if I had shown her who I really was, she would have pretended to be someone else. There was a moment, quiet, insignificant on the surface, when I knew the outcome was inevitable. We were alone, sitting in silence after another gathering where I had been reduced to a punchline. She sighed and said, almost absent-mindedly, "You know, sometimes I worry I'm settling." Settling. She said it without malice, without fear, without any concern for how it might land. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Clara didn't think she was hurting me. She thought she was being generous. Despite the humiliations, I stayed. Not because I didn't feel them. Not because they didn't hurt. I truly believed she would change. Love has a way of convincing you that cruelty is temporary, that sharp words are just growing pains, that if you remain patient long enough, the person you love will eventually meet you where you are. I told myself that the woman who embarrassed me in public wasn't the real Clara. That the real Clara was the one who softened in private, who leaned against me when she was tired, who spoke about dreams of a future that sounded, at least in words, like it included me. I made sure she never doubted how I felt. I told her I loved her, often openly without embarrassment, not just in quiet moments but in ordinary ones too, in the car, over the phone. Through messages she sometimes replied to hours later. I said it without expecting anything back because I believed love given freely could change people. When she dismissed me, I reassured her. When she mocked me, I smiled and stayed gentle. When she questioned my ambition, I listened instead of defending myself. I held her hand in public even when she tried to pull away. I walked her to her door even when she didn't invite me in. I waited after work to give her a ride home because I wanted her to feel safe, wanted her to know someone was always there for her. I remembered her favorite coffee. I checked in before her meetings. I encouraged her ambitions even when she belittled mine. I celebrated her small wins like they were mine. And every time she hurt me, I convinced myself it was a test. That love meant endurance. That if I just stayed kind long enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, she would eventually see me, not as someone beneath her, not as someone she had settled for, but as someone who loved her genuinely without conditions. What I didn't realize then was this. Love doesn't soften everyone. Sometimes it teaches them how much cruelty they can get away with. After months of rejection, hesitation, and humiliation, Clara surprised me. She accepted. Not with excitement, not with relief. With calculation. She had just come out of a frustrating week at work. Her manager had dismissed her proposal. Her friends were busy. Her dating prospects, men with impressive titles, had stopped replying. That night she called me. "I've been thinking," she said. "You've always been consistent." Consistent. Not desirable. Not respected. Just reliable. I told myself that was enough. That love sometimes grows from safety. I ignored the way her acceptance felt less like choosing and more like settling. Dating her didn't soften her. It emboldened her. She now felt entitled to mock me openly because, in her mind, I had accepted my position. At a dinner with her friends, she raised her glass and joked. "Daniel's ambition is to one day afford this place." Laughter exploded. I smiled. Inside, something detached permanently. Later that night, she said casually, "You're not the kind of man I imagined myself with, but life is about compromise." That was the night I stopped imagining a future with her and started preparing for an ending she couldn't see coming. Few weeks later, Clara came home one evening unusually animated. Her heels clicked faster than normal as she crossed the room, her voice already rising before she even set her bag down. "Daniel," she said, excitement sharp in her tone, "you won't believe this." I looked up from the table and waited. "Sterling and Rowe Holdings," she announced almost reverently. "They're recruiting for a senior executive position, strategy division. This is huge." Sterling and Rowe Holdings. I knew the name well. It was one of the most influential firms in the country. Quiet power, deep capital, a company that didn't chase headlines but shaped markets behind closed doors. A position there didn't just elevate a career, it redefined it. Clara paced as she talked, already imagining the future. "The salary alone would change everything," she said. "The exposure, the network, Daniel, this is the kind of role people wait years for." I watched her carefully. I could already see what this opportunity meant to her, not just professionally but personally. This wasn't about growth, it was about validation. And still, without hesitation, I encouraged her. "You should apply," I said calmly. "You're qualified." She stopped pacing and looked at me, surprised, not by the suggestion but by the confidence behind it. "You really think so?" she asked. "I know so," I replied. That night I helped her. I sat beside her as we reviewed her resume line by line. I adjusted phrasing, strengthened language, reorganized accomplishments. I reminded her of projects she had minimized, reframed her experience in a way that highlighted leadership rather than effort. She watched me work, occasionally correcting me, occasionally questioning my suggestions, but she listened. When she hesitated, I reassured her. When she doubted herself, I steadied her. I helped her craft the application, refine her cover letter, prepare responses that reflected confidence instead of desperation. She never once asked how I knew what Sterling and Rowe valued. She never questioned why I understood executive hiring language so well. She just accepted the help, as if my role in her life was to support her ascent, quietly, invisibly, without recognition. When she finally clicked submit, she exhaled deeply. "Whatever happens," she said, not looking at me, "this could change my life." I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said, "it could." What she didn't realize was that she had already stepped onto a path where every choice, every word, every past humiliation would soon be replayed. The response from Sterling and Rowe Holdings came sooner than Clara expected. She burst into the apartment waving her phone, her face lit with triumph. "I got through the first stage," she said breathlessly. "They shortlisted me." She laughed, a sharp, satisfied laugh I had heard many times before, but this time something else followed it. A pause. Then she looked at me differently. Not warmly. Not appreciatively. Calculating. From that day, her tone toward me shifted. It wasn't kinder. It was distant, as if I had already begun to fall behind her future. She started rehearsing interview answers out loud, pacing the room, speaking over me when I tried to offer suggestions. When I corrected her phrasing once, gently, she waved me off. "This is executive-level thinking, Daniel," she said. "It's different." Different from you was what she meant. Still, I supported her. I drove her to the second interview when it was raining. I waited in the car while she went in, rehearsing notes she had written with my help. When she returned smiling, energized, she barely acknowledged me. "They were impressed," she said, "very impressed." She checked her reflection in the mirror before adding, "This is exactly the kind of environment I belong in." I nodded, but I noticed something else. She no longer asked how my day went. She no longer leaned on me when she was tired. She spoke about her future as if it were already separate from me. As the final interview approached, Clara became colder. Sharper, more impatient. One evening she sat across from me, arms folded, eyes already somewhere else. "I need to be honest," she said. "I can't afford distractions right now." I waited. "This role, this level, it demands a certain lifestyle," she continued. "A certain image." Image. She looked at me as if measuring something and finding it insufficient. "I don't think you fit into where I'm going," she said quietly. There was no apology. No gratitude for the support, the nights spent helping her prepare, the patience I had given her when she had none for me. Just a conclusion. Efficient, clean, final. I nodded slowly. "If that's what you want," I said. She exhaled, relieved. Not heartbroken. Relieved. As if she had finally cut away a weight. The night before her final interview, Clara barely slept. She practiced answers in front of the mirror, adjusted her suit repeatedly, rehearsed confidence until it sounded rehearsed. I watched quietly. She didn't ask for help this time. She didn't need it anymore. At least that's what she believed. Before leaving for bed, she turned to me and said something almost casually. "Tomorrow decides everything." She was right, just not in the way she imagined. Clara was ushered into the executive lounge by a quiet assistant who spoke with the calm authority of someone used to power. The room was massive. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooked the city. A long, polished table dominated the space, already surrounded by men and women in tailored suits, directors, board members, people whose presence carried weight without noise. Clara felt it immediately. This was where decisions were made. She straightened her posture, smoothed her jacket, and took the seat offered to her. The interview began almost immediately. The questions were sharp, strategic, unforgiving, market positioning, leadership under pressure, ethical decision-making, crisis management. Clara answered confidently, this part she had prepared for. The board exchanged glances, notes were taken, heads nodded. Finally, the lead director leaned back slightly and said, "You've done well so far, Ms. Williams." A breath she didn't realize she was holding escaped her lungs. "The final stage," he continued, "will be brief. Our chairman will be joining us shortly. He makes the final decision on senior appointments." Chairman. The word landed heavily. Clara nodded, trying to maintain composure, though her palms were damp. She adjusted her seat, eyes drifting toward the door at the far end of the room. Seconds stretched. Then the door opened. The room changed instantly. Every director stood. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," one of them said. "Good morning, Chairman," another followed. Clara turned slowly and froze. Daniel walked in calmly, dressed in a dark, tailored suit that fit him with effortless authority. His presence wasn't loud, but it commanded the room. He acknowledged the greetings with a slight nod, his expression composed, professional, unreadable. Clara's vision blurred. Her chest tightened, as if the air had been pulled from the room. This wasn't confusion. This was collapse. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced backward through every memory, every joke, every dismissal, every moment she had looked down on him. The man she had humiliated. The man she had abandoned. The man she had assumed was nothing. He was the chairman. Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She swallowed hard, struggling to keep herself together. Daniel took his seat at the head of the table without once looking at her. For a moment, she thought she might break down right there. When the lead director began to brief him on the interview process, Clara leaned forward slightly, her voice barely controlled. "Daniel, I didn't know," she whispered, her words breaking. He didn't acknowledge her. Not a glance. Not a pause. He reviewed the documents in front of him calmly, flipping through pages as if she were any other candidate. "Thank you," Daniel said evenly. "I've reviewed the interview feedback and assessment notes." Clara's heart pounded violently. This was it. She was certain now that this was where everything ended. That he would do what she deserved. That this was revenge. Daniel looked up, his gaze moving briefly around the table, still never resting on her. "Ms. Williams," he said professionally, his tone detached, "has demonstrated strong strategic thinking and leadership capacity." Clara's breath caught. "Based on the panel's evaluation," he continued, "and the company's requirements, her appointment aligns with our objectives." He closed the folder. "She has been approved for the role." Silence, then restrained nods, quiet confirmations. Clara's mind couldn't process it. Confusion washed over her face. She had been certain he would destroy her career. That he would make her pay. Instead, he had elevated her. And that realization hurt far more than rejection ever could. Because it meant something far worse than revenge. It meant he had moved beyond her. And she was no longer important enough to punish. Clara left the Sterling and Row building in a daze. The congratulations from the board sounded distant. The elevator ride felt unreal. The city outside moved normally, indifferently, as if something monumental hadn't just shattered inside her. Her phone trembled in her hand. She didn't hesitate. She called Daniel. Once. No answer. Again. Still nothing. By the third attempt, her composure cracked. Her voice shook as the call finally connected. "Daniel, please," she said quickly, afraid the line might go dead again. "I need to talk to you." He listened. She could hear it in the silence on the other end, not coldness, not anger, just calm. "I'm sorry," she said, the words tumbling out. "I didn't know, I didn't understand, if I had known who you were." He stopped her gently. That's exactly the point, Daniel said. There was no accusation in his voice, no bitterness. You had every chance in the world, Clara. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. Her breath hitched. I loved you, she whispered. I still do. There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke again, slowly, clearly. That isn't important anymore. The words landed softly, but they crushed her. What mattered was how you treated me when you thought I was nothing, he continued. That was the real choice. She tried to say his name again, but the line went silent. He had ended the call. Weeks passed. Clara settled into her new office. The salary was everything she had dreamed of. The title impressed people. Doors opened easily now. Yet every time she walked through the executive corridors, she felt a quiet weight pressing against her chest. Daniel never spoke to her unless it was strictly professional. No warmth. No familiarity. No history. He had moved on. And slowly, painfully, Clara realized the truth that no promotion could soften. She hadn't lost Daniel because she chose ambition. She lost him because she failed character. She had been loved by the most powerful man in the city, and dismissed him because she thought power had a certain look. And that mistake followed her far longer than success ever could. If you found this story interesting, please remember to like the video and hit the subscribe button. Also turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of our amazing videos. And lastly, endeavor to share the video to your friends. Thank you and see you in the next video.